Radio's digital network. That is youtube.com/Secrets of the Sire, facebook.com/Secrets of the Sire, twitch.tv/Secrets of the Sire, and secretsofthesire.com, or go to siredigital.com. Tonight, Game of Thrones Season 8 finale predictions sure to go wrong. D&D co-director Brian Stillman, and a special guest, our Game of Thrones expert, my lovely wife, Mrs. Christina Dolce. But first, I'm your host, Michael Dolce, and joined, as always, by my co-host extraordinaire, although he might get bumped if she does well, because she's right here, Hassan Godwin. How you doing, sir?
You're convincing me to throw this, then.
Wants out.
Like this whole time I could just leave. Like,
yeah, I could get off this middling podcast.
Yeah, easy. It's always been easy, except I'll keep digging you. It'd be like, you're on. I left. I quit. Be like, no. This is,
here's a link.
That's like that.
Attach the link.
That's like that Seinfeld episode where George tried to break up, and she's like, "No, this is a two-way thing. We both have to agree to break up." And he's like, "What do I do?" And that's it. They were together, and that was it. She's like, "No, I'm not throwing this away." All right.
I've actually had experiences like that.
Cersei's fate was revealed. A lot of people complaining, a lot of people talking. But first, obviously, if you haven't seen Game of Thrones to this point, well, spoilers are coming. So I can't imagine at this point, at this stage in the game, if I've actually seen a lot of people who are like posting online saying, like, starting up this thing called Game of Thrones. Too bad. We're talking spoilers. We're talking Season 8, Episode 5, Season 8 in general, The Bells. Hassan, are you in the crowd of people that is now unequivocally unhappy with how this season has gone and how this particular episode went? Are you kind of okay with everything, or are you in the I am in favor of everything that just took place in episode 5?
I'm in the middle. I'm kind of okay with it, but I acknowledge the season is very flawed. And I mean that most of it's because of how short it is and how little time they have to basically wrap. I think it's arrogant to try to take a story as massive as this that's been on for 8 years, and to try to wrap it up in 6 episodes. But it's been it's been an impressive 5 episodes so far. You know, just visually and with the events that are going on. It's just that it's I don't know what you would call it. I don't know. I find myself I'm at odds with a lot of people who hate it, not because they hate it, but with some of the reasons that they say that they hate it.
Yeah,
and then I agree with them about a lot of things also. So
I think there's a difference, and we've talked about this before on the show, between outcome and execution, right? Story and execution. I'm actually really totally fine, and my wife will interject in a second because I think she has some disagreements here.
We both have to agree with her because she's a producer. So
the character, right? The character progressions. I'm okay with the outcome that Dany is now the Mad Queen. I'm okay with the fact that Jon Snow chose the wrong decision because he was really focused on the Night King. I'm okay with the fact that all of these things, that Cersei met her match and met her fate and Euron and all these things. The execution of it, I can like you, I can agree with some of it is a little off. Now you're not happy at all though that Dany went Mad Queen on all this.
No, I think it was just rushed.
Yeah.
Like they had 6 episodes. Who decided that it was going to be 6?
The producers.
HBO? The producers?
No, the producers. HBO wanted them to continue. They wanted at least 2 full more seasons, possibly 3.
They should have done this season should have been the Night King, and then next season should have all been about Cersei.
Yeah. I don't disagree. It's funny though. I think when you're doing a show for as long as they have, I mean, we sometimes tend to forget that these are human beings. Yes, they have the most massively popular show on the planet at this particular moment in history.
Even now.
Even
this show is the highest rated of all their shows this last episode. So, I mean, it's not like they're taking a dive. I mean, like their public opinion is against them, but it's not like they're popularity is taking it.
Correct. And it's, that being said, there is something to be said about the human toll that these things take on a person. The secrecy that they have to continually be in because of this. They're shooting and they have to worry about helicopters and spoilers. They also have just the mounting pressure of ending something that in their minds was probably supposed to have been ended already before they even got to this point. So I can kind of see them, 2 years ago being like, man, been doing this for 6 years now. Like, my wife hasn't seen me. My kids miss me. I don't know what's going on with the world outside. I can't walk around without, feeling that I'm going to give something away. Like, I wonder if the human toll of being the producers and creators of this massive hit that is Game of Thrones is just taking its toll. And that's why they said, we're out. Because they only wanted to do one more season. They said 6 books, 6 seasons. And they were supposed to end it after 6. And HBO is like, or 7, was it 7 books, 7 seasons? I think that was what it was. 7 books, 7 seasons. And HBO is like, well, you're a cash cow. Can you please continue to make seasons? So they said, all right, we'll break the season 7 up into 2 seasons then. That's why there's abbreviated seasons. They really had planned to end this all in 1 season, which I agree with you guys both, is doing it a complete disservice. But I'm not upset with how it's turned out, though. I mean, overall.
I guess. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of prophecies that were in the books that there's no clear way that they're going to be resolved in the show.
Yeah.
And if you're George R.R. Martin and you created this whole fantasy world and spent all this time, like, detailing these prophecies, it's just sloppy. Like, they're not going to be in the show. The world makes no sense. Like, that's what makes me upset about the whole thing.
Aside from being a producer, her credentials are that she read all the books.
I did.
Repeatedly, too, I think, right? Or you want to do it. Or Hassan, you're the repeated offender?
Yeah, I've read them twice.
Yeah, so
I was going to go back and read them again.
But so that's her credentials as expert here, is that, you've told me this.
That's a huge chunk of time out of your life trying to go through those.
That's all the time. Yeah. It's all the time that I'm spending with you. She's got to fill it somehow. So
I read the books.
You can have them back.
Yeah. Right? Thank you.
So without belaboring the is it rushed or is it not? What's that?
I said too late.
Oh, we didn't belabor it yet. If we continue.
No, you belabor it. No, I'm just kidding.
I actually do find it funny how it's reached the mainstream level, though. I was watching the Dan Le Batard show the other day, and he starts talking about it, and he's saying to his sidekick Stu Gatz, he's like, he's a peripheral Game of Thrones fan, so he's just like, it's now reached that point where it's taken a turn, and this beloved show that people have loved for 7 years is now taking the turn to they could do it better. The level of enjoyment has gone from I really enjoy this show to let me take it from here. This is how it should have went.
Yeah, that's the problem with fandom now. Is everybody? It's not everyone deciding. Well, I really don't like the way this is going, or I really don't enjoy this show now. It's everyone deciding how the show should actually happen.
Right.
Whereas I agree with not liking it. I don't agree with it. Your fixes wouldn't help. I mean, some of the predictions that people were coming up with have been so outlandishly terrible. That even if I don't like what we got, I'm glad we didn't get what they thought we were going to get. Like, Tyrion as a Targaryen, Tyrion's going to ride a dragon.
Yeah.
You got like Drogon had dragon babies, and that's
read that one. Mike won't read any of that. He doesn't want to know, so I can't discuss it with anyone.
But now you can, because there's only one episode left. So
I know. Forget Mike. We'll just talk about Game of Thrones.
Yeah, we'll just ignore him.
I'll see you guys later. It's time for lunch.
I'm out.
And I mean, I don't think anybody could do it better than what these guys have done. Now, having said that, I really think that they messed up. I don't know why they insisted on making the season so short. Look,
that's the thing.
They're tired of it. I get it, but this is a commitment that you made.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
If tired of a lot of things. You're tired of doing your job every day, but if you don't do it, you get fired. So, I mean, it's a commitment that you made.
I mean, that's the thing, too. Like, if you take, not the Bells, because I thought the Bells was great, but the episode previous, they literally like super glued 2 episodes together into one. At one point, we're reminiscing about, hey, we beat the Night King. This is great. And you have that great sequence with Jaime and Brienne. You have all these really great things. And then just before you can even take that all in, or even, theoretically speaking, they could have expanded that into an entire episode. And I think all of us would have been really cool with that. You're immediately into King's Landing. You're immediately seeing one of the dragons just, I don't know, magically get shot down, out of thin air, and Euron comes through and all this stuff. And it's like, and it's truncated. Dany's, who I know I'm going to mispronounce her name, gets her head chopped off. Yeah, Missandei. I was going to say Melisandre, but that's not right. Missandei gets her head chopped off.
No, she dead already.
It's like all these things kind of happen in the span of like, whoa. And you can sit there and say, well, Game of Thrones has always thrown you curveballs. It's not the curveballs that are throwing us. It's just the rapid fire in which they're shooting them at us. That to me was where I'm like, something feels a little crunched, not forced, but crunched. The outcomes are fine. All of these outcomes are great. The descent of madness that Dany succumbs to is basically one quick scene of a bad hair day and some smeared makeup, and then you're like, oh, she's nuts now. She's crazy. Whereas if you did have the luxury of two,
I don't 100% agree with that, because she's been taught, even before she was technically mad, she's been talking about burning down King's Landing last season. Okay, so you're talking about someone waiting for 2 seasons, the equivalent of 2 seasons.
Even more actually. If you go,
I'm talking about like King's Landing in particular, not just burning her enemies, but he's been talking, and everyone's like, well, look, if you burn the city down, like everyone's gonna hate you, and no one's gonna love you, So you gotta deal with all these political machinations so that you can actually take over with the support of the people. And she just wants it, now. She doesn't want a prolonged war, and so I say, like, one of the flaws is she didn't come in and try to take the temperature of the country. She didn't try to understand the country. She did commit a large part of her army to this war, but you can't say she did it for someone else, because once you find out there's an army of dead people that are going to take over the country that you're trying to conquer, it is in your best interest to go take care of the dead people before you take care of the living people.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's and if she knew that if she helped Jon, she would have Jon's support. She would have his army also to help her as she tries to take over from Cersei. So it is kind of her impetuousness that has caused the situation, and her insistence that everybody, they're kind of weird mixed message of wanting to break the wheel but still wanting everyone to bow. There's always been like these signs that that her process isn't exactly 100% on message, and she's had a whole lot of people to help, like, straighten out her curves. And now that all these people have died, all through various means, and 2 of her kids, she lost 2 children, which is drive any mother insane.
Sure.
It doesn't seem like it's too much of a stretch for me, this situation. However,
no, but visually,
thought that she was a hero.
Yeah,
that I can understand how that would be jarring. I don't know why anybody is finding heroes in Game of Thrones, though.
Yeah,
this show is not about heroes. So
that was your immediate reaction, though, too, Christina. Mrs. Dolce. That was your immediate reaction, though, too.
Fix.
When no, she's agreeing with you.
But it's still a fix, because she's the producer of the show. I told everyone who watches the show that the 2 of you are related. I suspected it. Somehow I just had a suspicion.
Actually, technically, we're not related. We're married. It's much different.
That's a form of relation, sir.
I guess so, but it's, when you say it like that, I feel like it's a more of a,
She is technically your next
of a Jon Snow Dany situation.
No,
I'm not older than you.
But your initial reaction was you didn't like the fact because Dany was supposed to be different, right?
Yeah, it bothered me. You have the whole series, like, freeing slaves from chains, striking down the maesters, coming in saving the North. Like she would have had major props from everybody in King's Landing for essentially saving all their butts.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's like, I hear those bells. And I'm gonna burn them anyway. Like she just didn't. I understand. She lost Missandei. She lost 2 dragons, but she lost Viserion at the beginning,
Right.
And she didn't go into like insane at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, I get what Hassan's saying too, though, because she has that small council with Varys and Tyrion, and it was getting harder and harder for them to get her to agree.
Yeah.
Like she was hesitating more and more and listening to what they had to say. So you could kind of see it coming, but the women and children, dude, it's upsetting.
And Varys' betrayal.
After she saved all the other people and was like the mother of these people. It's like,
here's what I've been saying, like from the start about it. She's always been like kind of scorched earth, always burning her enemies.
Mm-hmm.
It's just up until now we didn't like everyone that she burned.
True.
But that burning them is the right answer. And now that we see how she would deal with a situation with innocent people, and that she has the same method. She's like, look, if you don't just bow down and do what I say, I'm just going to set everything on fire.
Right.
Basically, if you watch her through, because I did cycle through the show again in the process of watching this last season. If she does, her answer to everything is to set it on fire.
Right.
Every time she hits a wall, she just sets the wall on fire, or she threatens to set the wall on fire. And because she was up against like these ridiculous odds in the beginning, and you're with her as you watch her build up her, this amazing force of devoted followers, you're in the mindset that she is in the moral right.
Right.
But her methods are not, are arguably not the right methods. She solved very few problems in the last 7 seasons diplomatically. Every time something happened, she showed up, she set everything on fire with her dragons, and then everyone remembered that they should be worshiping her.
Well, how's this also for foreshadowing in the prophecy, which was in season 2, in the House of the Undying in season 2, Dany has a vision of walking through the Red Keep's throne room. The ceiling is broken open. Fans assumed the white particles falling into the room was snow and that winter had come to the south. In Sunday's episode, Dany is finally taking King's Landing, and buildings are indeed being destroyed, but it's not snowing, it's raining ash from the dragon's destruction. The season 2 scene is a vision of Daenerys taking King's Landing only by becoming the Queen of the Ashes, in quotes. In the same season, she also literally declares, "We will lay waste to armies and burn cities to the ground." The mass crucifixion and Marine, her tendency was to then, in retaliation with regard for their individual guilt or innocent, Sir Barristan advises her to be more merciful. Revenge for Sir Barristan, also in season 4, after Sir Barristan was killed by the terror group Sons of the Harpy. In response, Dany brings 3 masters to her dragon pit. All swear they have nothing to do with the rogue ones. She burns one of them alive to send a message to the others. And again, kind of to your point, Hassan, we were happy when she did that. We were like, yeah! Now we're kind of like,
yeah. Because that's not an I'll set you on fire is not an organizing principle. Do what I say or I'll set you on fire is not diplomacy. It's not leadership. It's just strength and power.
This is
severity.
This might come off as a tad insensitive, and I want to preface by saying that because I actually don't mean any dissensitivity by this.
But you can say it anyway.
Yes. That's why I preface it. That's what's called a preface. Okay?
Yeah, I know.
Chris Cornell, rest in peace, an amazing, talented musician, amazing lyricist. His lyrics throughout the entire 90s run of Soundgarden are dark and depressing, talking about suicidal thoughts, talking about depression, talking about all this stuff.
He has a song called "Like Suicide." So
right. But
even though
you never felt, when the day came that he actually did commit suicide, it was a total shock because you got to see this public persona of him. You see him in concerts. He seems happy. He seems wonderful. Yet the groundwork, literally, then all of a sudden we went back and go, oh, he was serious. He wasn't just talking about a moment that maybe he felt
the same with Kurt Cobain. Like all his songs, that entire first album is about committing suicide.
Right.
And everyone's like, "Oh, wait, this just came out of left field." No, it didn't.
Right. And that's where the comparison in my head, that's what immediately came to me. I was like, wow, maybe there's, the writing has been on the wall. The other thing that we were all excited for was the Hound finally takes on the
Clegane Ball! Yes.
Were we excited? Were we happy? I'm sure everyone was excited that it took place. Here's the thing. As not a book reader.
Should read books, man.
They need to have pictures.
Read books.
I was not as excited. I feel like if you read the books, you were really excited for the Hound versus the Mountain. Is this true?
It's really not even that much. It's not really that much in the book as the show.
No.
Really, is fans of the show who have.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll say personally. I don't know how.
It's like that sibling rivalry. Like he did like some not nice things.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
No, I mean their rivalry, yes, but did you get the impression that a Clegane Bowl was going to happen in the books? Or?
Oh no, BuzzFeed, and then I bought into that hype. Like,
Exactly.
She is obsessed with the post Game of Thrones Twitter feed and post Game of Thrones.
It's so fun. People just come up like these people are geniuses. They just come up on the fly with these memes and these like. They find memes everywhere to explain the episode. It's really good.
I feel like Game of Thrones, much like Star Wars, right? I feel like it has this deeper. Some people have this deeper affection for the mythology and the behind the scenes and the deeper relationships that exist, whereas I kind of am entertained by it and I'm impressed by the storytelling. That's kind of where my limit goes, because one thing that kind of happened, and at this point it's been 8 seasons, I couldn't remember, but is the fact that A, no one really wins the fight, but B, the Hound has to overcome his fear of fire, essentially, and basically lunge the Mountain into the flaming pit for him to actually vanquish him. And the actor who plays him, Rory McCann, says it's a glorious death. He's laughing at it. The Hound can see the Mountain can't be killed by sticking a dagger in his eye. He has to be burnt. Of all the things Clegane has to do, he has to go into the fire. That's the sacrifice, but his pain is over. And
I mean, they could have done it in a better way thematically, because I mean, he knocks him through a wall, and they fall into the fire. So arguably, you could argue he didn't even know that wall was going to give way and that they were going to fall into fire.
Yeah,
not like he purposely saw fire,
right?
Decided to jump into it, but it's still thematically it works.
I think he kind of knew also when he did it. So.
Well, he knew he wasn't going to win.
Yeah.
After you stab someone through the head and they pull the knife out, you're lowering your chances.
Here's the funny thing: when he took off his mask, I thought it was Varys actually for a second. I was like, "What's Varys doing there?" Oh, it's just another bald guy.
He leaned over.
and someone on Twitter had remarked that he looked like Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi when you take the mask off.
Yeah, but everybody who's bald and looks scaly is always used to looking like Darth Vader.
Did Clegane Ball live up to the hype for you?
Yeah, because you had that good like Hound one-liner where he's like, "Why won't you die?" And it's like, even during that fight with like the vendetta, he still had his like sense of humor, and they wrote him with that, so they made it kind of amusing to watch. Yeah.
So one thing, that was the other big thing, Varys being killed at the beginning, which I don't think we're shocked by it. It was a turn, it was a twist, but again, that at least kind of flowed pretty naturally. The ending of Cersei and the ending of Jaime, people are pissed. They're pissed at how it went down. Now, you had mentioned there's prophecies galore that are not coming to pass. What are those prophecies from the books?
Battling car.
What Hassan said. Like, basically, a younger brother. Okay, wait, back up. So Cersei met with like a witch in the woods that first saw her future.
Which we saw in the show.
Right. And said you're going to have 3 children. Only 3 children.
Maggie the Frog. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. I don't remember. You read them twice, obviously. Yeah. I'm like, I read it once.
Well, I read them, but I've also been watching all this, the same stuff that you've been watching, all this after action reports from on YouTube or all over the internet.
Yeah, so she also said that the Valonqar is gonna strangle you to death, and that means younger brother. So is it Tyrion or Jaime? And a lot of people thought with Jaime's redemption arc that he was gonna be the one to kill her, and no.
Arguably, her little brother was the one who did it, though, because he didn't
Tyrion did
bring the army to crush his, and his sister was thoroughly crushed in that very one-sided battle.
He was like, go down in the cellars, through the sewers, you'll get out.
People were pissed that it was a metaphor. They're like, we didn't want a metaphor. We wanted to literally see Jaime.
That's the problem. It's not like she got away and they didn't fulfill the prophecy. It's just they didn't like how the prophecy was fulfilled. But I don't understand. I get not being happy with it, but I don't understand like having expectations in a show that is notorious for defying your expectations. And I'm not even talking of subversion of expectations. I mean, this show basically started that.
Yeah.
I mean, if they beheaded Ned Stark, that's it. I was talking to some other people, and I said, like the show starts with a kid who runs right into the White Walkers and is so terrified about what he sees. He sees dead people, and he says he sees like demons, with blue eyes killing his friends. He's so terrified he runs away, gets caught by the good guys. He gets caught by the Starks, and they chop his head off for running away from the Night's Watch. So his reward for surviving this unbelievable encounter with the supernatural is to get your head cut off by the law. I mean, and that's how the show starts. And then, this kid's climbing around. You think he's going to be a hero. He gets pushed out a window, and then no one knows who pushed him out the window. So he's obviously not going to be the one to take us through the entire story. The other kid who you think maybe it's going to be this kid because they're spending a lot of time with him. They ship him off to the Foreign Legion, basically, to the Wall, and he gets stuck there, and he finds out that the Wall sucks, and now there's nothing he can do because he's signed on for life, so he's not going to be involved in any of the other political craziness that's going on down south.
Yet.
No, yeah, not yet. I mean, it takes him 6 years before he can get untangled from all that. And then his dad goes down south, and you think he's going to be the moral center, and they cut his head off. I mean, that's season 1. All that stuff happened in season 1. I don't understand how we get to season 8 and people are still like, I can't believe that they didn't, follow through with these threads and these arcs are not completed. The show's not about heroes. The show's not really about arcs. It's about one-upmanship. It's about people they're all trying to get this throne, right? They're all the act of going after the throne is the corrupting force that makes everybody kind of crazy, and it makes everybody do like these desperate things because there's a way everybody could get that throne if they play the long game. Everyone can get that throne bloodlessly if they play the long game. And nobody has ever taken the long route. Everyone's always gone for the expedience. All from Aegon and Harrenhal and how he just burned, all the Ironborn in Harrenhal, in all the way back in Aegon's conquest 300 years earlier, or Field of Fire, that situation, from Tywin Lannister killing all the Starks at the Red Wedding, with treachery and I mean, nobody is willing to hammer it out. Nobody's willing to negotiate. Everyone's using treachery and deceit or unprecedented power to get what they want. I don't see how watching Daenerys and her name is Daenerys world, not Daenerys. Crazy every time I hear people like review the show and they call her by her wrong name.
It's good to know other people butcher things too.
Yes, not just you. I mean, I know you're the leader of butchering names.
I did get my
competition. And so I understand that the truncation of the season is a problem. I understand the writing has been subpar since pretty much around season 6, since they ran out of books. I think the writing is the same.
When you say writing, what specifically? Because I don't think.
Wait a minute now.
Interactions between the characters have been any different. I don't think the scenes have been any less dramatic.
This is reminiscent of another discussion we had with us on the other side of that discussion.
I think that it is truncated, and therefore it feels...
Well, I was about to say the dialogue is still solid.
Okay.
The writing in that sense is still solid.
Okay.
But the problem is that without the books, there's a pacing issue.
Yeah. I wonder if it's the book.
A gravitas. It's free of this gravitas. There's a gravity of there's weight to all the decisions and all the things that happen, and all decisions when you had the book material led to into other repercussions.
Yeah.
All your decisions actually led to things getting more and more complicated and less clear, and everything is more tangled. And then, as you watch it, you start to slowly get weaned off of the tropes that we grew up with.
Sure.
Like, this guy's obviously not going to be the hero.
Right.
This guy thought that was going to be the villain. They're fleshing him out. They're adding more dimension to him. So he obviously, even though he pushes children out of windows, there's obviously more to him than just being a villain. This other guy's really smart, even though he's a bastard. This other person is really not so smart, even though he's like the virtuous hero.
Yeah.
So all these things kind of fall apart, and they're done in such a way, they're done with such gravity that you accept things not happening in what we have come to consider the natural order of the way stories are supposed to transpire.
So that being said,
but when they lost the books, they lost the only thing they have left is their ability to subvert expectations.
Sure.
They don't know how to do it in a manner that people find delightful.
That being said,
do it in a manner that people find kind of jarring and terrifying.
We got about a minute left in this segment. Give me that being said and all wise and accountable. What is your prediction sure to go wrong for the series finale next week, honey? Who ends up on the throne? I was talking to his son, honey.
I know what I think is going to happen.
So go ahead.
I think Jon is going to end up with the throne because, of course, he doesn't want it. He ends up with everything he doesn't want, like this whole time. So he's going to fall into that. And then I think he's going to peace out of Westeros. I think he's gone. I think he's going to be like, no, thanks. And
that he's going to. So Alexa Fox actually posted that
Westeros.
Jon Snow is one of the most incompetent rulers of all time, that he actually hasn't solved anything. He hasn't actually completed any tasks. He didn't kill the Night King. He didn't do all this stuff, and he's just going to...
That's not true. That's an oversimplification.
I don't disagree with you on that at all, but he's going to idiot his way into the throne, and then at the end, when the dust is finally settled, he's going to be like, I'm out.
He's always said all along, I don't want it.
Yeah.
But the people are going to give it to him, and they're going to want him. So the only way he can remove himself from the running is either leave Westeros or kill himself. I mean,
yeah.
Oh, wouldn't that be a twist? Jon Snow at the end, just jumping off.
He does a Tommen. He does a Tommen.
Yeah.
Hassan, prediction sure to go wrong.
I kind of have to agree. If it's sure to go wrong, I think I would say Jon Snow becomes the king of the Seven Kingdoms.
And everyone lives happily ever after.
And everybody's, hey, Jon Snow! and Daenerys, if it's all sure to go wrong, Daenerys is like, you know what? After I burn this city down, it's all out of my blood. I'm going back to Essos because everybody loves me there. So I'm just gonna pack my stuff up and leave. Here's the kingdom. Enjoy. We'll send ravens back and forth over there.
I was gonna say, just bend the knee.
Yeah,
I'll know if you're lying.
Yeah, exactly.
The big theory now.
That ain't gonna happen.
The big theory now is Sansa's obviously coming to take that back, and she's going to be the one eventually on the Iron Throne. But,
I think Sansa's too smart to want to be queen of the.
Yeah.
I think she's seen it destroy like bunches of people, and I don't think she's going to want it. But who knows?
My prediction, sure to go wrong, is that Jon Snow will end up on the throne because it will piss so many people off if he ends up there. Like, do you understand how much that is just going to royally piss people off? What I think, though, if I really thought about it, is the most logical person if he manages to survive next episode, but she seems to always survive, is Tyrion. Tyrion would actually be a great leader. There would be some sort of poetic arc to it that he ends up assuming the throne. I remember in season 2 thinking like how great a tactician he was and how great a leader he was. I know he's messed up a lot as the hand of the queen.
Yeah, when they ran out of books, he ran out of smarts.
Right. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I think he would
He's
also...
He's a Lannister, though.
But I think there's something about a Lannister still sitting on the throne when all is said and done. So, all right.
You know what? To be honest with you, I know we have no time left. To be honest with you, I actually suspect that it's gonna, in some weird way, my longtime suspicion is gonna end in some kind of democracy.
Yeah.
Without rulership whatsoever.
Yeah. Hey, we never saw a body with Jaime and Cersei. You never know. They were just crushed.
There's always that possibility. And crushed. Then, Tyrion finds Cersei trying to climb out of a pile of rubble, and he strangles her, and then everybody's happy with the vow.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be great? She's like crawling out, just
like, I got you, I found you.
All right. When we come back, we're going to actually have my interview. Hassan and Christina are going to go off to the side, and they are going to just discuss the Game of Thrones books. And we're going to have my interview. It's an awesome interview. Actually so fitting when we booked this, just because of the influence it's had on Game of Thrones. There's a new documentary coming out called Eye of the Beholder, The Art of Dungeons and Dragons. We've got the co-director, Brian Stillman, coming up next.
Do you like comic books and movies like The Avengers? How about TV or pop culture like Game of Thrones or Star Wars? Then you've come to the right place. Hi, I'm Michael Dolce, host of the Secrets of the Sire podcast. Joined every week by my co-host Hassan, Lord of the Radio Godwin, we bring you the inside scoop on the pop culture universe you love to talk about. And you never know who will drop by to chat. To date, we've welcomed actors Kevin Bacon, Paul Reiser, True Blood's Christina Anapow, and Buffy's Nicholas Brendan to the show. We've been privileged to interview rockers Chris Cornell, Macy Gray, Billy Corgan, and more. And we've even had Jackie the Joke Man himself from Howard Stern in studio to share some laughs. So join us every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on youtube.com/Secrets of the Sire for brand new episodes. Take a moment, subscribe to our channel, and be on the lookout for some major new announcements coming soon. For more info, log on to secretsofthesire.com.
Welcome back to Secrets of the Sire. We do this every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern on the Sire Digital Network. We talk comics, movies, TV, and pop culture. I am thrilled right now to welcome the co-director of The Eye of the Beholder, The Art of Dungeons and Dragons, which is out now on Netflix. And Mr. Brian Stillman, how are you doing, sir?
I am good. Thanks for having me on.
So you are the co-director along with Kelly Stagel. You're also involved, or Kelly Slagle, sorry, and you're also involved in Netflix's big super hit, The Toys That Made Us. Talk to us about your role on each of those shows and, you know.
Eye of the Beholder, I am the co-director. Like you said, I'm the co-producer, one of three with Kelly and Seth Polanski. Mm-hmm. And I was the shooter and director of photography on Eye of the Beholder. So did the interviews, most of the interviews along with my partners. Very hands-on. I originally approached them with the idea to make this movie. We were friends from our previous projects. And we, it occurred to me that'd be fun to work with them. I knew they were gamers.
Sure.
I knew they could bring something to it as filmmakers because they make more narrative projects. I make documentaries. Mm-hmm. So I thought it'd be fun, and it turned out to be a blast. Awesome. So that's Eye of the Beholder. Toys That Made Us. My title is weird. I'm technically a consulting producer, but for as much consulting as I did in the beginning, they eventually brought me on as kind of, I guess, a field producer and shooter and interviewer. So I do a number of the interviews, East Coast stuff, generally, for the show. So if someone needs to be if they need someone, they'll send me along with all my gear. I'll sit down, produce it all, get it back to them, and then they do their magic. So yeah, kind of depends on what they need.
Very cool. Very cool. Eye of the Beholder, I thought was really fascinating. First off, are you a big gamer? Are you a big Dungeons & Dragons guy?
I am. I've been gaming since the early 80s. I grew up on first edition and a little bit of second edition. I played that for all the way up through college. And I eventually got out of gaming for a little while, got back in with 5th edition,
Yeah.
which is what I've been playing now, 5th edition and 1st edition at conventions and stuff.
Okay.
So I'm very much a gamer, a D&D player. I absolutely love the game. It's always been a part of my life. And the art was always a big part of it, too, for me. So it was sort of a natural thing. When I'm into something, I decide, okay, you know, I'm a journalist, I'm a filmmaker, and I'm into this thing. Sure, why don't I spend 3 years making a movie about it? So that's kind of where it all comes together.
Must have been a real drag for you then to work on.
Oh, you know, there's nothing worse than meeting your idols and the artists that you grew up on and getting to ask them all sorts of questions about how they came up with some of your favorite art. It is a terrible, terrible experience.
You know, so it's funny. I'm a graphic novelist by trade. We do the podcast and kind of use our knowledge for that. So for me, it was actually very fascinating to see. I'm not a gamer. I'm obviously an artist, and I love the art world in general. And so to see this, I mean, what was it like to talk to the artists? What was it like to experience the creative vision through these artists that you interviewed?
You know, it was fascinating. You know, these are people I grew up with, many of them. You know, these are people who shaped what my idea of fantasy art is and shaped the way that I thought of these worlds that I played in when I played D&D. So they had a really impactful role on me growing up. So having a chance to sit down with them was like the ultimate fanboy experience. You know, I've been a journalist for a very long time, and I've covered stories ranging from, you know, buildings on fire, drug laws, things like that, very heavy, serious stuff. I've also covered music. I've covered entertainment. I was a music journalist for a long time. So I've met all sorts of people, and I've maintained my composure in front of all of them. You know, I've met celebrities that I've admired and things like that. There were so many times when I nearly lost it interviewing these artists. You know, the fanboy was so overwhelmed by the sheer enormity of it and how cool it was. Like, I'm sitting across a camera from Jeff Easley, you know, or Larry Elmore, Clyde Caldwell, or Diesel LaForce, or Jeff D. I mean, I could go on and on. All these people that I grew up with. So that was amazing. But also the new artists, the people who I hadn't grown up with, but who I was getting into through 5th edition, through earlier editions of the game. Their work is just so good and so immersive and so entertaining, you know, and technically proficient that sitting across from them was a thrill as well. You know, here I am fanboying out just thinking about it. So it was great. It was great.
What kind of questions did you guys dive into with the artists? 'Cause I'm always fascinated by this too, just to see, you know, both from an outsider and an insider perspective, what, you know, people always tend to ask, like, where do you get your creativity from? And where did you get this inspiration from? So I'm sure there's a bunch of those kind of questions.
But here's the thing. I mean, so you're an artist, you'll understand this. Where does your creativity come from? It's kind of hard to answer that. It's like, well, I don't know, my brain. There's a tiny little gnome who lives inside my brain, and he's constantly churning on the creativity machine, and it's spitting out ideas. Like, it doesn't work that way. A lot of these people, these artists, don't really have great answers for that beyond, you know, my ability comes from practice. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, so they become good artists. And I think beyond that, so many of them take inspiration from the world around them. So if they're doing monster design or creature design, a lot of them talk to me about just going to the zoo, sketching real animals, understanding how they work, and then saying, how can I incorporate that into a dragon? Or forget a dragon, something like a Neo-Odiug, which is a completely made-up, bizarre creature with tentacles and 3 legs and mouths everywhere, all this crazy stuff. Well, how can they incorporate their sort of real experiences into that? So a lot of their approach centered on that, taking the real and bringing it into the fantasy, not to make the stuff realistic, but to kind of make it sit in a way that's approachable and understandable. But others were just like, you know, my art director told me they need this. So that's what I gave them. And I tried to do it as cool as I possibly could. So it was different for everybody.
Yeah.
A lot of our questions really focused on the history. We really wanted to understand less where does your creativity come from, but more how did it work? You were at TSR or you're at Wizards of the Coast. How does that system work where there's a module or a game book or whatever with a concept? How does that get to the printed page, and how do you get there as an artist, and how did that get to us as the gamers? So that was a big part of our questioning, just sort of understanding what life was like back then and how it all came together.
And I would imagine you're also going to be touching upon the history of the game itself for the techno geeks out there who want to know the ins and outs of how this was created.
Well, limited. One of the things we decided early on, we knew there are other things out there that really dive into the history of D&D and the history of the game in a way where that's what they were devoting all their time to.
Yeah.
So they're going to do it really well. We had to talk a little bit about it to provide some context.
Sure.
Dungeons and Dragons is a game. This is what it is. It's a role-playing game. This is what that means. But we didn't do too deep a dive into that. There's enough for you to understand this is a game, and it is a fantasy role-playing game.
Sure.
Beyond that, if you watch this and you don't know how to play D&D, you're not going to walk away knowing how to play D&D.
Exactly.
However, you will understand why the art's so cool.
You kind of touched upon it early on, but take me even deeper into the genesis of this project. You know, it's something that you're just a fan of. I mean, how do you approach producers? How do you pitch this as something that not only you would get other people excited about, but get people who will cut the checks and give the green light excited about this project?
Cut the checks. Wow. That's some huge presumptions. All right. So here's the deal. The cool thing is we produce this ourselves. I have a production company, X-Ray Films. Seth and Kelly have a production company called Cave Girl Productions. So we didn't have to get it green lit in that regard. We decided we were going to make this thing. We figured out a budget roughly a little after the fact. We were like, I guess our budget was this. That's how much we spent. And we just did it. That's the sort of beauty of independent documentaries. Sure. If you have a great idea, you can just do it. We're lucky in that, you know, I was shooting it, so I didn't have to get paid. I own all my own equipment, so we didn't have to have rental fees incurred with that. Kelly is an editor, so we knew on the post-production side she was going to do the editing. Seth is a location and a post-production audio engineer. And on top of that, he's a lawyer. On top of that, he's a contracts lawyer. So between the three of us, we handled most of the expensive parts of making a movie, or this type of movie, this type of documentary, where you don't need a very large crew. So that made our lives a lot easier.
Great.
And, you know, you self-finance it for a while, and eventually you do what so many movies do. You go to Kickstarter or Indiegogo or some sort of crowdfunding, and you raise money for post-production. Even though we had an editor, we had an audio engineer in place, there's so many other things. We had animation, we have color correction, you have music, and all these other things that need to get paid for.
We're always under the impression that time is not money. I mean, that's a saying for a reason. I mean, you know, some people ask if you can do everything yourself, you know, what do you need the money for? It's like, well, I need to eat.
Yeah.
The time I'm spending. I have to.
You're doing this around your other work. You know what I mean? Like, I produce videos for other people. Kelly's an editor. Seth's a lawyer. These are things that pay our bills. And so you're covered, but you have to really approach this stuff as a labor of love. You have to really decide, this is something you're passionate about. This is a story that has to get told. And you have to be the one who tells it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no way to stick with a project for 3 years that during that process is only costing you money. It's costing you money. It's costing you time. It's costing you your sanity, possibly your health, all these things, because you care so much about this and you're confident that other people are going to care about it too.
Yeah.
The sort of wonderful thing about this world is if you like a thing, there's a very good chance there are other people out there who like that thing also.
Yeah.
And because of the way we can get things out these days, different streaming services, everything else, if nothing else, you put the thing on YouTube. You know what I mean? There are other people who will see this thing. So it makes it, in some ways, a little bit easier for indie doc makers to do this kind of stuff. You can go in thinking, well, someone's going to care. Yeah. And then you cross your fingers and just sort of leap from that airplane and hope your parachute's packed properly. And, you know.
what was one of the most exciting interviews that you had within this? You named some of the big heavyweights, but what was one experience where you went in with a specific set of questions and came out with an answer that you just completely surprised you?
That's interesting. It was never so much as a matter of overturning our expectations. Mm-hmm. We had talked to these artists. We do a lot of pre-interviews. We had met these people at conventions. We'd become somewhat, like at the time, casually friends with them. Mm-hmm. So the conversations had been ongoing by the time you sit down in front of the camera. That said, some of the small details, the stories you get, often come out of nowhere. A great story we got was from the artist Brahm, mm-hmm. who told us that one day the marketing department came in, a bunch of executives. They went over to Jeff Easley and they said, "Jeff, we have this really important project for you. So we want you to not only paint it, but we want you to use your most expensive color." Which is kind of an insane thing to tell an artist, because the color, the cost of the tube of paint has nothing to do with whether it's an appropriate color. And then another time they came to him, they said, "It's really important, so we want you to use all your colors." There's like this attitude that the sheer volume of paint used somehow justifies the cost or impresses the people who are going to see this thing. So stories like that would come up a lot, that show this kind of disconnect that the artist's working under. So we always thought that stuff was great. We got lots of things like that.
I have such a deep insecurity that when you just mentioned that, I go, does that really matter? I actually just you said that. I does that?
Literally does not.
Because I get my stuff online and no,
then you're a failure. Yeah, clearly your stuff's never going to stand up.
Clearly,
everyone knows. Yeah.
Something about D&D that is actually fascinating right now, too, is just in general, this pop culture universe has just exploded. Not just D&D, but obviously the Marvel movies, all this stuff. Yeah. My co-host last week were actually talking about how there is no delineation between, or at least we feel like, jocks and geeks and nerds. It feels like everyone is just allowed to enjoy this stuff. Is that something you're finding when in the process of making this documentary, is just the sheer amount of people that typically you might not see would be kind of game for this kind of stuff?
Yeah. The funny thing is, these last few years, so I grew up in the original kind of heyday of Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s, mm-hmm. when we got the cartoon, we got a line of toys from LJN. Yeah. But we also got the Satanic Panic and all these other things. But what we were definitely seeing was the injection of Dungeons and Dragons into the mainstream. I mean, this mm-hmm. was the time, at least shortly after time, in the late 70s, D&D went from being in hobby shops to being in bookstores. And that's where you saw a lot of these other artists start to come in, Easley and Elmore and Parkinson and Caldwell, people who could kind of help them compete visually with a lot of these other things that were on the shelves, paperbacks and things like that. So I saw all that, and then I saw it all taper off again. In the late 90s, in the early 2000s, I saw D&D kind of drift back into the background. Gamers were still into it, but it wasn't this pop culture force that it was. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm amazed and happy to see that D&D is becoming a lifestyle brand. Yeah. It's made that shift. You have Joe Manganiello with his Death Saves clothing line. You have all these live streams of people playing D&D on Twitch and on YouTube and stuff. The cartoon that was just funded to the tune of like $12 million or $11 million. All this stuff that's happening, I think really shows that it's broken beyond the confines of just being a hobby or just being a game that people play. It's becoming a brand the way comic books are a brand or Disney is a brand, where people are getting into mm-hmm. the idea of Dungeons & Dragons and might not have ever actually played the game. And I don't think their connection to it is any less legitimate because of it. There are all these ways to enter into this thing that is Dungeons & Dragons. And I hope they all eventually want to play the game, but it's becoming bigger than that, maybe. And I'm curious to see where it goes. But it is great. It is awesome to see so many people getting involved, so many different people getting involved. Yeah. It's not the same people sitting down to roll dice all the time. Yeah. So it's I think it's wonderful. I think it's fantastic, and it's something I'm definitely seeing.
Impressive. This is our Game of Thrones episode. We are both previewing the finale, and we're waxing poetic about Sunday's episode. Are you a fan of the show? And what influence or what impact do you think Dungeons and Dragons had on the not the success of Game of Thrones, because it was its own thing, but again, it's a mainstream fantasy series that, by all accounts, really should never even get greenlit to begin with, if you think about it. But do you think Dungeons and Dragons had an impact on it?
Well, I should start by admitting that I don't watch Game of Thrones.
Oh, no!
It's because I don't have HBO.
Oh.
My wife and I cut the cord ages ago.
Mm-hmm.
So to watch it, it's always been, okay, I have to wait till the season's finally streaming.
Sure.
And then it's become this thing where it's like, okay, well, I'm not ready to sit down and commit to this yet, because it really feels like a commitment. And now that it's almost...
It is.
Well, and now that it's almost over, I feel like I can jump into it.
Cool.
When it's done, I will be that guy who watches it like 3 years after everybody else. And honestly, look, everyone's talking about how brutal Game of Thrones is and how such great fantasy and all the dragons and everything else. Well, I got news for you. Have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons? What do you think I do every week? You can have your Game of Thrones. Oh, someone was murdered? Welcome to my game. Roll initiative. I got news for you. You are in trouble. So to me, it's like, okay, whatever. But it does look awesome. So, okay, so with that out of the way, I think that D&D has absolutely had a lot of influence on what we think of as modern fantasy and how we visualize modern fantasy. When you think of things like World of Warcraft, when you think of things like Skyrim, video games, stuff like that. Yeah. That's where you see a lot of it. And then Lord of the Rings. Obviously, Lord of the Rings precedes Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. But the visual vocabulary of it is absolutely, I think, the result of the visual vocabulary of Dungeons and Dragons, which is interesting because Dungeons and Dragons pulls from Lord of the Rings. Sure. Even though Gary Gygax said he didn't like Lord of the Rings, and he sort of grudgingly pulled from it. Sure. He was a shrewd businessman. He understood that. But there's this sort of circle going on there. And I think Game of Thrones probably, it's part of that evolutionary thing. But I think it owes as much to Steve Jackson and Lord of the Rings as anything else. But if you really go back to that kind of early thing, I think Dungeons and Dragons is definitely an influence. But that is building off of things like Frank Frazetta and the artwork that he did in the 50s and 60s and 70s and onward. I never want to lay the sort of evolution of something on one thing, because everything's building off everything before it. But to ignore the role D&D played being the biggest fantasy outlet throughout the 80s, that would be a mistake. So I do think it's probably, look, someone working on that show played D&D. There's no way they didn't. So I think it must, but I don't know. I can't say for certain.
Well, tell everyone out there where they can find it and where they can watch the movie.
Eye of the Beholder is everywhere. You can watch it on the moon. No, we're on iTunes, and we're on Google Play, and we're on Amazon Video, and we're on PlayStation and Xbox, all sorts of things. If you go to eyeofthebeholdermovie.com, we have a list of places with links. You can find us on Facebook, Eye of the Beholder Movie. You can find us on Twitter, eye_movie. Thanks,
That's
Twitter,
E-Y-E,
for that.
Right?
E-Y-E? M-O-E-Y-E, yes. Eyeballs. And we're on Instagram. I think we're Eye of the Beholder Movie on that as well, but it's so hard to keep track.
Brian, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on, and anytime you got something going on, feel free to drop on by our podcast. We would love to have you.
Thanks so much for having us. We appreciate it.
All right. When we come back, we go spinning the racks. Welcome back to Secrets of the Sire. Again, we do this every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern on the Sire Studios Digital Network. I want to thank our guest from Eye of the Beholder, the co-director, Brian Stillman. He's also a producer on The Toys That Made Us on Netflix. Go on to Amazon, iTunes, check out the documentary. It is really amazing. We got a screener copy. We got to watch a little bit of it before we got to interview him. It's totally worth it, especially if you're a fan of the show, fan of the game, if you're a gamer. Plus, if you're just a fan of fantasy art in general, it's unbelievable. So definitely check that out. Before we go spinning the racks, my lovely wife wanted to bring up one more prophecy that so far has not come to pass. Which one is that?
The prince that was promised.
Okay.
Right, Hassan, you haven't seen anything to this effect.
Now he'll argue that it has been done, but what is the prophecy?
Okay, hold on.
Azor Ahai is the prince of promise.
Yeah, so there will come a day after a long summer when the stars bleed and the cold breath of darkness falls heavy on the world. In this dread hour, a warrior shall draw from the fire a burning sword, and that sword shall be Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes, and he who clasps it shall be Azor Ahai come again, and the darkness shall flee before him. So in the books, it said that he'll stand against the darkness, and if he fails, the world fails with him.
Now, let me ask a question, though. Has that been brought up at all in the show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, they did
mention
mention
the prince that was promised for many seasons.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't particularly recall it, but I just want to make sure that it's one of those things, because I know with Catelyn Stark, that it hasn't, Lady Stonewall, that's a book thing.
That has to happen. Yeah.
That's a book thing, period, and it has no influence or bearing on that. All right. Before we go spin the rack, Secrets and Sires brought to you by all of our beloved patrons, Craig Caruso, Einar Peterson, Matt Byer, Ashley Haikai, not her name, Omar Morales, our program director, Stephanie Dolce, and as always, our Uber fan who's joining us today, Christina Dolce.
Fix.
We do this every week. We go spinning the racks.
Spin the rack, spin that rack.
We are going to save our Avengers Endgame spin the racks for next week, but we've got a couple of those too, and oh man, we're going strictly Game of Thrones right now. Another Game of Thrones gaffe, Jaime Lannister grows his hand back. Just when Coffeegate was about to simmer down, Game of Thrones serving up another hot
Simmer down. Oh, metaphor.
You let me finish. Is serving up another hot screw up.
Puns.
Fresh off the anachronistic appearance, this is from New York Post, appearance of the modern-day Java Cup in Episode 4, Jaime Lannister appears to have miraculously grown back his severed hand in a promo image from Episode 5, The Bells. HBO retaliated, however, and said that is a promo photo, therefore they did not CGI in anything or whatever the case is, and the actual video itself, he does have his hand. But as mentioned, this comes on the heels of Coffeegate, which Game of Thrones star Sophie Turner blames on Emilia Clarke. Game of Thrones actress Emilia Clarke, who portrays Mother of Dragons Daenerys Targaryen on the hit HBO series, is responsible for the modern-day coffee cup, according to Sophie Turner. She was on Fallon, and she said, let's clear this up. So she was being blamed because she was previously photographed on set with a similar cup, but she threw her fellow actor under the bus. Let's clear this up. That's in a different episode. Turner said of the on-set snap, which shows her holding the...
Yeah, but she's also with Lyanna Mormont, who had definitely died the previous episode. So
yeah. And also, we all have the same cups for all our water and tea and everything. So I'm just going to go with, look who's placed in front of Emilia Clarke. She's the culprit. Larger issue, do these gaffes or apparent gaffes lend credence to the theory that this has been a rushed season, that even with all this time to prepare, they're missing these key things?
Yeah, I think the key thing that I missed is that nobody died by slap chop from Jaime Lannister.
Oh, yeah. He did slap.
I wanted a golden hand slap chop death.
He did get a couple in on Euron, though, so that was pretty good.
Yeah,
that was also one of the dumbest fights I've seen. And it could have, again, if there was more, just the fight itself was not dumb. The outcome to the fight was not dumb. Had they had more time to flesh out the rivalry between those two a little bit more, or at least build it up to a little bit more of a crescendo. It struck me as odd that Euron...
Something is up with that. Something is up with the reason that Benioff and Weiss decided to truncate the last two seasons.
Yeah.
It's very... I understand HBO saying they wanted 2 more seasons, and these guys wanted to move on. But yeah. I don't understand, taking your magnum opus, the thing that put you on the map, and just toss it, just throwing it in the last in the landing, just not sticking the landing with it. So I think something more.
Yeah,
something is coming.
Yeah, something behind the scenes that no one's willing to talk about is why these 2 seasons. And I mean, maybe HBO did say, "Look, I'm not." HBO is notorious for that. Like when a show is not, when a show is coming to an end, they like to truncate the endings for whatever. They'll cut the episodes to a last season down in half for some reason. They won't commit to a full season. Although I do know that supposedly they wanted more.
Right.
And the two showrunners decided they didn't want to do it. But something is up because it just doesn't make sense. The decision doesn't make any sense.
That's what we like to call a segue. Game of Thrones co-creators David Benioff and D.B. Weiss to direct the first Star Wars film after Rise of Skywalker. They're trading in their swords for lightsabers, according to the Daily News. Game of Thrones showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss will direct the first Star Wars movie following this December's highly anticipated Rise of Skywalker. Disney CEO Bob Iger confirmed on Tuesday. It was announced last year that Benioff and Weiss will lead a series of Star Wars flicks unrelated to the Skywalker saga, but the timing of the films had not yet been revealed. Tuesday's confirmation, which Iger made at the Moffat-Nathanson Media and Communications Summit, comes a week after Disney announced 3 new Star Wars films slated to appear starting in 2022. Maybe they have a Yoda in their ear. Maybe they have a lightsaber in their ear. Maybe the bug to do Star Wars. Maybe they are like J.J. Abrams, where he kind of did a Star Trek movie, but he was always been a Star Wars fan and wanted to do Star Wars. Maybe this has been developing for a few years now, and they just kind of said we need to break free of Game of Thrones. I mean, maybe you're right, Hassan. But that would be
but that doesn't make any sense though. We're gonna toss this. We're gonna throw this so that we can make Star Wars. You know,
yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. So just finish what you started. Finish it as best as possible. And hey, look, maybe they think they did.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a level of ego and arrogance, right?
In second viewing, if we all watch everything all over again, we might think the second time around, oh, this isn't quite as bad as it was the first time around. I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Like, once the other 2 books are out and we read the other 2 books and then we go back and watch it, like, I feel like maybe we'll be like, okay.
You know who's got to be loving this? Has got to be George R.R. Martin, because I've had this theory for a while that he's holding those books back so he can see
he's not.
The reaction.
He came out in an interview that he's not.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he's pissed about it, too. He's pissed
but
he thinks that's what he's doing.
Well, he could say all he wants. I mean, I'm sitting there saying, why would he release these books? He can almost litmus test out this ending and just see what people like and didn't like, and then kind of go off in his own direction if he wants to. I mean, it's the perfect thing. The only thing that I think would be bad for him and his legacy is if he immediately released the books. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he literally is still writing them. Yeah. But
I think people are so unhappy with the way this season is going. They're gonna soak those books up.
He is the winner here, right? He is the winner of this whole thing. I mean, there's no question. All right, we are the winners every week because of you guys. Keep commenting, keep joining us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go like us on Facebook. Go follow us on Twitter. Just look up Secrets of the Sire. Next week, well, lo and behold, we're going to talk Game of Thrones again. Did the series finale live up to the hype? We are going to give you our full review. Plus, we're going to count down the top 5, maybe 3. We haven't decided yet. Series finales of all time, and where does Game of Thrones rank? And we've got Source Point Press's Travis McIntyre to give us a scoop from Motor City Comic Con, where Sire Studios will be in attendance. We'll see you all guys next week.